No one expected the seismic shift when Jasmine Crockett challenged President Trump during a live debate. She did not yell. She did not grandstand. She simply told the truth, and the entire room shifted. America shifted too. It was a Thursday night. In Cleveland, the kind of night where even folks who never watched politics tuned in. Every major network had cleared their primetime slot. The presidential debate was on, but this time, it was not just the usual suspects. Among the lineup of congressional representatives brought in to challenge the president on policy, one name caught people's attention: Jasmine Crockett. She was not a household name. Not yet. A second-term congresswoman from Texas, known in certain circles for her sharp questioning during House oversight hearings and her blunt style on social media. But tonight, she was on a bigger stage. Across from her stood the most combative figure in American politics, President Donald J. Trump. The camera panned across the stage. Red carpet, white columns in the background, gold-trimmed podiums. President Trump stood dead center, flanked by 2 GOP allies and 3 Democrats. He wore that familiar blue suit and long red tie, shoulders slightly hunched, jaw set. He had the advantage. He always did on television. He understood how to command space, how to fill the silence with noise, and that was exactly what he was doing. They have had for years to fix anything. President Trump boomed, pointing to his left, where Representative Sanchez from California stood. And now they want to act like victims, like I am the reason their states are falling apart. Applause trickled in from a few supporters in the back, carefully placed in the audience section for visual support. The moderator, John Melrose, tried to interject. "We will return to that point, Mr. President, but now I would like to bring in Congresswoman Crockett." President Trump's eyes narrowed slightly. He had not looked at her once until that moment. The camera cut to Jasmine Crockett. Hair slicked into a low bun, no flashy jewelry, a midnight blue blazer over a simple white blouse. Her posture was firm, hands placed gently on the podium. She did not look angry. She looked steady. "Thank you, John," Jasmine Crockett said, her voice even. "Mr. President, I want to ask you about your administration's decision to cut funding to the Community Health Access Program last year, specifically the clinics in East Baton Rouge, North Tulsa, South Dallas, all places that serve working-class black families. Your administration said those clinics were inefficient, but the data we now have shows that over 63,000 people lost access to primary care because of that cut." President Trump made a face, somewhere between confusion and irritation. He started, shaking his head before she even finished. Excuse me, he cut in. "Those programs were corrupt. They were bleeding money. They were handing out Medicare cards like candy. They saved taxpayers millions." John Melrose tried to step in, but Jasmine Crockett kept talking, calm, precise. "I have seen those clinics. I was born down the street from one. There's no candy there, Mr. President, just mothers waiting 6 hours for a pediatric visit, grandfathers lining up for insulin refills they cannot afford at Walgreens." The room got quiet. Not a dramatic movie scene quiet. It's more like the kind that happens when someone says something you cannot argue with, even if you want to. President Trump leaned into the mic. "You do not know what you are talking about. Are making it sound like I personally shut down a clinic in your neighborhood? I was not there. I do not know every zip code in America." Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. Reply came fast and clean. "You do not have to know every zip code. You just have to care what happens in them." A few people in the studio let out audible sounds, the kind you hear in church when a truth hits a little too close. President Trump raised his hands, scoffing. Okay, so you want to play the race card now? Here we go. That is what it... This is right, poor me, poor them, blame the president. Same story, different debate. That is when it changed, because Jasmine Crockett, instead of reacting, looked President Trump straight in the eye and said it, slow, clear, and deadly. "You cannot claim to care about all Americans when your policies keep leaving the same ones behind." But the night was far from over, and the moment that just shook the room, it was only the beginning. The control room upstairs did not need a memo. Camera angles changed. Tight close-ups, one on President Trump's face, tight-lipped, shifting. His weight. One on Jasmine Crockett, unmoved, eyes steady on the man across from her. No drama in her voice, no theatrics. That was what caught people off guard. She was not performing. She was present. John Melrose, the moderator, hesitated, then asked, "Congresswoman Crockett, would you like to continue your response?" Jasmine Crockett nodded briefly, but did not look at him. She kept her eyes on President Trump. "I represent the people of South Dallas, Mr. President. Some of them voted for you, believe it or not, and even those who did not still have to live under your policies. You cut health access in their neighborhoods. You slashed school grants, too. Then you called them ungrateful. That is not leadership. That is spite." President Trump chuckled. I've dealt with a lot of angry people in my career. You might want to watch that tone. A little respect goes a long way, sweetheart. A few gasps rippled through the room. John Melrose leaned into his mic, trying to steer things back. "Let us keep this civil." But Jasmine Crockett smiled. Not a forced smile, not a polished, made-for-TV smirk, a real one. The kind someone makes when they have heard the same insult 100 times, and this time they are done pretending it stings. She said, "I am not your sweetheart. I am a sitting member of Congress, elected by over 230,000 people. And I am not angry, I am informed. If that feels threatening to you, maybe it is because the facts are not on your side." It landed. Even President Trump's expression changed, not to rage, but to something much more dangerous. Calculation. He squinted slightly, leaned back on his heels. He was not used to this. Not from someone like her. Not this public. Not this sharp. "Okay," President Trump said, trying to recover.
Ow.
"So what is your big solution? More government spending? More handouts? Let us just give everyone free everything, right? Because that works so well in Venezuela?" Jasmine Crockett did not answer right away. Instead, she turned slightly toward the audience, toward the cameras, really. Her voice softened, just a bit. I spent 8 years as a public defender before running for office. You meet a lot of people in that job. Single moms who cannot take a sick day, teens trying to care for a grandparent, men who work 60-hour weeks but cannot afford their blood pressure meds. I did not see laziness. I saw people doing everything right and still falling behind. So if you are asking me if I believe in investing in people instead of punishing them, then yeah, I do. The silence in the room was different now. It was not tense. It was focused. Even the opposing lawmakers on stage looked uncomfortable interrupting her. Not out of agreement, but because no one wanted to be the one who cut her off. President Trump finally spoke, but quieter this time. "Jasmine, can I call you Jasmine?" No laughter, loud, surprised, even from the crowd behind President Trump, that did something. It broke the illusion. For the first time in the night, President Trump looked like the one trying to recover. He forced a laugh. "Okay, Congresswoman Crockett, fine. But I think Americans are tired of hearing how bad they have it. I think they are sick of the blame game. You do not win elections by whining." Jasmine Crockett leaned slightly forward on her podium. "You do not lead by pretending everything is fine when it is not. That is not optimism. That is denial." Someone clapped. It was not clear who, but it did not matter. More followed. Not overwhelming applause, but deliberate, certain. The kind of clapping that builds momentum. John Melrose jumped in again. "Let us move to the next question on infrastructure." But President Trump was not done. He waved the moderator off and looked straight at Jasmine Crockett. "Tell me something you think people actually want. What you are selling, or are they just mad enough right now to believe it works?" Jasmine Crockett paused just for a second, like she was weighing the question. Then she answered, "I think people are tired of being told their problems are imaginary. I think they are ready for someone who does not just show up for the photo op and disappear when the cameras are off." And with that, she stepped back, arms at her sides, the kind of ending that does not need music or editing or spin. It just hangs there. But if that moment was the spark, what came next lit the fuse. It did not take long. By the time the debate cut to its first commercial break, Twitter, now rebranded as X, had already clipped Jasmine Crockett's takedown and posted it on at least 30 verified accounts. Some added music, others just used the raw feed. One post from a DC-based journalist read, Did she just say, "I am not your sweetheart" to the president? Crockett came to cook tonight. The numbers surged. 300,000 views, then 500,000. Then 3. Jasmine Crockett was not just trending, she was dominating. Her words were not perfect. That is what made them hit. They were real. You could hear the fatigue behind them, the sharpness of a woman who had had to repeat herself too many times just to be heard. Inside the venue, the next round of questions dragged on. Infrastructure, inflation, school vouchers. But the energy had shifted. The focus was not on policy anymore. It was on the woman in the navy blazer who just stood her ground against the most powerful man in the country and did not blink, somewhere behind the curtain. Just off stage, President Trump's deputy communications director, Doug Holbert, was panicking. "I told you not to let her get too much time," he whispered to another aide, pacing near a row of black folding chairs. "She was on the schedule," the staffer replied. "You signed off on it. She is House oversight. She had to be included." Holbert ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah, well, it is a problem now." Back on stage, President Trump was trying to reset. He interrupted a Republican colleague to circle back to the healthcare topic, but it did not land. The shift was too obvious. He was trying to reclaim a room he had just lost. Jasmine Crockett. She stood silent. She did not need to say more. It was happening without her. Across the country, living rooms were heating up. In Detroit, a single mom named Risha texted her sister, "You watching this woman? I do not know her, but I love her." In Fresno, a retired teacher shouted at the screen, "That is how you talk to him." And in Philadelphia, a 16-year-old named Malik rewatched the clip 5 times and said to his older cousin. She did not yell, she just told the truth. Like, for real. Even some conservative-leaning voters were paying attention, not necessarily agreeing, but listening. Meanwhile, news anchors were scrambling. CNN cut to a panel 10 minutes early. MSNBC brought in a political analyst who admitted, "This was one of the few times I have seen Trump genuinely caught off guard in real time." Fox News tried to downplay it. Tucker Reeves, sitting in for the regular host, smirked and said, "Of course the left is celebrating. A congresswoman insults the president on live TV, and that is supposed to be brave. Please, give me a break." But his tone betrayed something else. He was not laughing. He was reacting. It did not help that President Trump could not move on. During the second half of the debate, he referenced Jasmine Crockett no less than 4 more times. Each time, the comments got more defensive, more agitated. He called her rude, uninformed, and even a danger to civil discourse. That last one got replayed almost as much as her original line, a danger for telling the president the truth. Later that night, Jasmine Crockett walked into her hotel lobby in downtown Cleveland, flanked by her communications director, a woman named Shayla Frazier, and her chief of staff, Reggie Palmer. The phones had not stopped buzzing. Reporters, endorsements, podcast invites. A campaign strategist from Baltimore had already emailed to say, "You do not know it yet, but tonight." Changed everything. Jasmine Crockett sat down on a bench near the elevators and finally checked her notifications. Over 12,000 unread messages. She let out a soft exhale, a half smile, and turned to Shayla Frazier. "Did I go too far?" Shayla Frazier shook her head. Without hesitation, "No, you did not even go far enough." Jasmine Crockett chuckled, then went quiet. Her eyes dropped to her shoes. "I was not trying to make a moment," she said. "I just did not want him to get away with talking down to people." Again, Reggie Palmer leaned against the wall. "You did not make a moment, Jazz. You answered one." But while the outside world was celebrating her rise, behind closed doors, another storm was already brewing. And it had President Trump's fingerprints. All over it, down a narrow hallway behind the stage. President Trump shoved aside the velvet curtain and stormed into the green room, followed by 3 aides and a Secret Service agent who looked less like a bodyguard and more like a referee trying to stop a fight that had not started yet. Who the hell let her get that much airtime? President Trump barked, his eyes darting. Around the room, like he was searching for someone to blame. Who approved that format? Who? The room froze. It was not a question. It was a warning. Doug Holbert, still holding a clipboard, stepped forward. "Sir, it was approved by the network weeks ago. You reviewed the lineup." "I do not care what I reviewed," President Trump snapped. "I looked like a damn amateur out there." Koyu saw the smirk, the way she talked to me like I was some city councilman begging for votes in a church basement. Doug Holbert hesitated. It was not a good look. "It's wrong." "Answer." President Trump spun toward him. "Not a good look." "Are you serious? That woman just called me a liar to my face on national television, and now she is trending higher than me. She is on every screen in America right now." He was not exaggerating. Back in the production trailer, a sound tech was rewinding Jasmine. Crockett's clip for the 4th time, trying to sync it for the late-night news loop. In a Washington, D.C. bar, people were chanting her last name while watching the replay. Even one of President Trump's own aides, 23-year-old Greg Marnes, new hire from Arizona, could not stop watching the footage on his phone. He knew better than to laugh, but he could not look away. Meanwhile, President Trump paced like a caged animal. She looked polished. She did not flinch. "Did you see that?" "I came at her and she stood there like a statue, like she planned it." Doug Holbert cleared his throat. It was not rehearsed. Her staff looked just as surprised. Backstage, President Trump stopped pacing. "Then find out who prepped her, 'cause that was not off the cuff. That was a setup." He pointed toward the door, then jabbed his finger in the air like it could cut through concrete. "I want a full list of every debate staffer, every moderator, every handler. If they knew this was coming and did not warn me, fire them. I do not care if they work for the network or the RNC gone. All of them." At that moment, Hope Kendrick, his longtime press secretary, stepped in with a phone to her ear and a grim look on her face. "We are already getting flooded with calls," she whispered. "Campaign donors are asking if we lost control of the narrative. Fox producers want to know if you will call in tomorrow morning. They are trying to spin it, but it is everywhere." President Trump's face went red. He reached for a water bottle on the table, opened it, then slammed it down without drinking. "She called me a liar and a coward," without raising her voice, he muttered. "I have gone up against world leaders. I have faced off with generals, but tonight that little..." He did not finish the sentence. No one spoke. Outside the room, you could still hear the debate finishing up, the crowd applauding politely, but the power had already shifted. Everyone in the building knew it. In the hallway, Jasmine Crockett's team was being ushered toward a private exit. Reporters crowded near the stairwell, trying to get a quote. "Congresswoman, one question, just one." She did not stop, just gave a polite nod, hand raised, walking fast. Her team closing ranks around her. Inside the green room, President Trump finally sat down. The couch creaked under him. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, palms pressed. "Together." "She embarrassed me," he said quietly. "On my stage." Doug Holbert opened his mouth but did not speak. What could he say? It was true. And President Trump was not used to losing the room, especially not to someone half his age with no presidential campaign. No Senate seat, no machine behind her, just facts and presence. Asterisk. President Trump stood again, adjusting his tie. "Schedule? A press conference tomorrow. No questions, just a statement. And I want opposition research on her desk in the morning. Everything. Voting record, tax returns. I do not care if she jaywalked in college. Give me something." Doug Holbert scribbled. "A note." Hope Kendrick spoke again. "What is the message, sir, for the statement?" President Trump stared at the wall for a moment. Then he said, "We remind people who is in charge." But while he planned his next move, the country had already made theirs. And Jasmine Crockett was not going anywhere by sunrise. Jasmine Crockett's name was more than trending. It was embedded. Cable shows opened with it. Headlines across social media platforms shouted it. The congresswoman who shut down the president read one. Another said Crockett stares down Trump and wins. It was not just politics junkies. Anymore, morning commuters on the I-94 in Michigan were hearing her quotes blasted on talk radio. Baristas in Boise were handing customers cappuccinos while watching her clip on the overhead TV. And in a quiet apartment in Baltimore, an elderly woman named Della Whitmore whispered, "About time someone told him the truth," before turning the volume up on her television. Jasmine Crockett was not new to tough rooms, but this was different. Inside a modest campaign office in Dallas, her phone had not stopped buzzing. Not calls, text messages, emails, tags, reposts. Her team could not keep up. Shayla Frazier, her comms director, had pulled an all-nighter, fielding interviews and filtering media requests. "People want to know if you are thinking of a Senate run," Shayla Frazier said. "Holding two phones and wearing the same blazer from the night before, like seriously asking? Outlets from Boston to Phoenix are calling. You, the breakout voice of the year." Jasmine Crockett looked up from her coffee. "That fast? Faster than fast? People do not care how many committees you sit on. They care that you did not flinch. You did not raise your voice. You did not smile for the cameras. You spoke like you were in your grandmother's kitchen, and everyone felt it." Jasmine Crockett looked down again, thinking, "I just told the truth." Reggie Palmer, her chief of staff, looked up from his laptop across the room. "Yeah, and that is what scared him." The team went quiet for a second. That was the part no one had said aloud yet. She had made him look small without raising her voice. And now people were seeing her differently. Not just as a bold voice on oversight panels or a viral moment on X. Something had shifted. But they also knew what came next, Reggie Palmer added. "He's coming for you. He is already talking opposition research. That means your law school days, your old clients, your taxes. They will dig until they hit concrete." Jasmine Crockett nodded. "Let them. I have lived my whole life under a microscope. If they find anything, they are going to have to make it up." Shayla Frazier tossed a new text across the table. "You've got a meeting offer from Stacey Abrams? She says she is available tonight. Zoom or phone. And the Congressional Black Caucus wants you to speak at next week's gathering in LA. Reggie Palmer added, "They just bumped someone to make room for you." Jasmine Crockett looked at both of them, half stunned. "I have not even landed back in Texas, and people are already talking about me like I am Michelle Obama." Shayla Frazier smiled. "Except you are not trying to please everybody." And she was not. She had never tried to be palatable. Not when she defended teenage shoplifters facing 5 years in county. Not when she stood up in committee hearings and refused to let representatives rewrite history with nice language. And certainly not when the President of the United States tried to downplay her community's pain on national television. She had not gone to that debate to make a name, but now she had one. And people across the country were seeing themselves in her. A truck driver in Des Moines posted a video to Facebook. "Y'all can say what you want, but that lady spoke for my wife last night. We have been waiting 6 months for a doctor's appointment because they shut down our clinic. It is not right. I do not care what side you are on. That is not right." A high school student in Oakland wrote an op-ed for her local paper titled, "I want to be like Jasmine Crockett." The clip of her line, "You cannot claim to care about all Americans when your policies keep leaving the same ones behind," was already being printed on t-shirts. She was not trying to go viral. She was trying to be heard. But now that she was, she had no plans to quiet down. But while America was waking up to Jasmine Crockett, inside the West Wing, a different kind of awakening was setting in, and it was not going down easy. Long before she stepped into that debate studio in Cleveland, Jasmine Crockett was arguing cases in packed courtrooms with broken air conditioners and flickering overhead lights. It was a courthouse in Marshall, Texas, where she first made noise, back when she was still fresh out of law school. Public defenders did not get much respect there. They were expected to do what they could with little to nothing. But Jasmine Crockett had a reputation for taking up too much space, for speaking too long, for caring too much. In one of her first cases, she defended a 19-year-old accused of armed robbery. The prosecutor figured she would sign it, advise the kid to accept 5 years and move on. But she did not. She asked too many questions, found holes in the witness timeline, dug into missing footage from a gas station camera. The jury took 2 hours. Not guilty. That case did not make headlines, but around East Texas, it made her name float into the right ears. Judges started learning to prepare when they saw her name on a case file. She was not flashy, but she was relentless. Growing up in a working-class home in Lancaster, just outside Dallas, she had watched her mother take night shifts at the post office, and her father hustled 2 jobs back to back. College was not a question. It was a path. But politics? That was not the plan. Not then. She never cared about climbing ladders. She cared about being in rooms where decisions were made. Her transition from law to politics was not a glamorous leap. It was exhaustion. Years of watching good people get crushed by a system that did not have the patience or the decency to care. So when a local state representative seat opened up, in Dallas County, Jasmine Crockett ran. No donors. No establishment backing. Just shoe leather and long conversations on porches. She won. Then came the redistricting battle, gerrymandering, voter suppression hearings, and through all of it, Jasmine Crockett found herself at a mic again and again, reminding people what the law was supposed to be for, not what it had become. The House Oversight Committee was not where most politicians look to shine, but for Jasmine Crockett, it was fuel.
She carved up testimony without ever needing to shout.
Her delivery was surgical, quiet, precise, and unshakable. The kind of voice you do not see coming, the kind that does not need volume to carry weight. One particular clip, just a year before the debate, showed her questioning a pharmaceutical executive. She listed the markup of insulin with clinical calm, charging $285 for something that costs $6 to produce. "I want you to say that out loud so people at home can hear it." "Go ahead, I will wait." He fumbled. She did not blink. That clip reached over 4 million views, but nothing compared to what happened after Cleveland. Now commentators were scrambling to define her. Was she a rising star? A future candidate for higher office? A disruptor? A threat? Late-night shows made jokes, some respectful, some not. Trevor Briggs, a host known for his edgy monologues, said, "Look, Jasmine Crockett told the President of the United States, 'I am not your sweetheart.' It's on live TV. If I said that to my boss, I would be filing for unemployment the next morning." The crowd laughed, but the punchline was not the point. The presence was. People wanted to know who she was, and Jasmine Crockett. She was not in a rush to answer. She turned down 3 magazine profiles that week, declined to do the late-night comedy circuit. She was not playing it cool. She just knew the difference between attention and power. One fades. The other shifts rooms. Back in Dallas, she finally found a quiet morning. Just her and a slice of toast on the balcony of her 2-bedroom apartment. She checked the weather, then checked her calendar. It was already packed. Shayla Fraser called. As she sipped her coffee, "You ready for LA? The caucus wants you front and center." "Yeah, I saw. You want a speech written?" Jasmine Crockett thought for a moment. "Nah, I will speak from the gut." "Worked last time?" Shayla Fraser laughed. "Well, your gut just broke prime time." Jasmine Crockett did not respond right away. She looked out over the street. Just cars, buses, and early risers trying to get to work. She whispered, more to herself. Then to Shayla Fraser, "I did not break anything. I just reminded people it is okay to speak like the truth still matters." But truth has a cost, and behind the scenes, forces were already moving to make sure she paid it. By the time the sun dipped below the Potomac, the White House briefing room was already at capacity. Not for a formal press conference, those were rare now, but because word had spread that President Trump was not happy. And when that happened, things got loud inside. Top aides sat in a hastily called strategy session, eyes tired, nerves on edge. Aides had seen the president upset before. But this was not a moment. This was pressure building, slow and ugly. Kelly Wren, his deputy chief of staff, leaned over the table, voice low. "We have got 2 problems. 1, she embarrassed him. She did it without breaking a sweat. That is not a news cycle. That is a narrative." The room nodded. They all knew. What that meant? Narratives stick. Communications advisor Brent Lockley pushed his glasses up and muttered, "We are getting roasted in the suburbs." Even independent women are quoting her line on Facebook. Another aide chimed in, and TikTok is wild. There is a remix of her quote over a gospel track that already hit 1 million plays. Across the room, no one laughed, No one dared. Asterisk president. Trump's former campaign manager now back in an advisory role, paced with his arms crossed. We have survived worse. This will pass. Kelly Wren shot him a look. It will pass if we do something smart, which means not going after her the way he wants to. They all paused, because that is what the fight was really about. President Trump wanted blood. He had already given the order. Dig into Jasmine Crockett's past. Leak something, twist a quote, anything to make her look less powerful than she appeared. But some in his inner circle were starting to question the approach. There is no win in punching down, Kelly Wren said finally. She is younger, smarter than they expected, and relatable. If he goes after her directly, it will only boost her more. But what is the alternative? Brent Lockley asked. Ignore her. Act like she is not worth it? Send a surrogate? Change the topic? Make it about disrespect to the office, not a back and forth? With a junior congresswoman, it was a decent plan on paper. But President Trump was not in the room yet. When he finally walked in, red tie loosened, hair slightly unkempt, the air changed. Everyone sat straighter. He did not greet anyone, just dropped a printout of a tweet on the table, one of the most viral yet, a photo of Jasmine Crockett mid-debate with the caption, "She did not raise her voice. She raised the bar." President Trump glared at it. We are not ignoring this. She got her 24 hours. I am taking the next 48. Kelly Wren spoke gently. Sir, with respect. If we swing too hard, we might shift sympathy her way. Shh. Raise an eyebrow. You think they are not already crying over her? They made her a hero overnight? A long pause. Then he said it, the thing they had been dreading. She is dangerous. They had heard him say that about journalists, about former allies, about judges and protesters. But this time, it sounded different. She has got the look, the voice, the story, and she does not blink. You know how rare that is? She does not blink. The room was silent. President Trump sat down slowly, his eyes still locked on the tweet. We are not going to touch her with fake scandals, he continued. That will backfire. But we will bury her in noise, flood the zone, question her record, cast doubt on her judgment, smother her name in chaos until people cannot remember why they liked her in the first place. Brent Lockley shifted. But that risks making her bigger, sir. Like AOC big. President Trump shrugged. If she wants to be AOC, let her. People hate her too. We just need to make her polarizing. Take her from being relatable to being controversial. That is the difference between a moment and a movement. Kelly Wren was not convinced. Neither were a few others. The division was forming. On one side, those who wanted strategy. On the other, a man used to steamrolling opponents, no matter the long-term cost. Outside the West Wing, journalists were already sniffing the tension. Inside, President Trump stood. I want a response on air by tomorrow from someone smart, someone polished. No one too angry. Just enough to muddy the water. Who? Brent Lockley asked. President Trump looked out the window, hands behind his back. Find someone who looks like her, talks like her, but says I am right. But while the administration planned its counterpunch, Jasmine Crockett was already 2 steps ahead, and she was not waiting for permission to speak again. The second panel was not supposed to be a showdown. It was framed as a follow-up dialogue on policy accountability, organized by the National Press Forum in Raleigh. But everyone knew what it was: the rematch. Cameras were everywhere. Analysts called it round 2 before the event even started. Invitations were extended to a dozen lawmakers across party lines, but the press did not care about most of them. They cared about 2 names: President Trump and Jasmine Crockett. This time, the chairs were closer, more intimate, less formal than the debate stage. A long table, bottles of water, lanyards instead of podiums. The audience was smaller too, mostly reporters, staffers, and insiders. Still, the tension was loud. President Trump arrived first, greeted with polite applause from the room. He looked composed, ready, but not relaxed. He had a folder in front of him filled with printouts, highlighted quotes, talking points, past statements from Jasmine Crockett he planned to reference. Jasmine Crockett walked in a few minutes later. No entourage, just a small notebook in one hand, a single pen tucked into her jacket pocket. She wore gray, this time simple, clean lines, professional but soft, a journalist whispered. She looks like she came to testify, not to fight. The moderator opened with a question about bipartisan healthcare reform. President Trump answered first, hitting his points with practiced rhythm: reinvestment, efficiency, waste, accountability. He even worked in a compliment. I think we all want better outcomes. Even the congresswoman here, who I deeply disagree with, is clearly passionate. A few chuckles, a few raised eyebrows. Jasmine Crockett nodded once, no smile. Then she responded, I am passionate, especially when policy decisions come from a place of indifference dressed up as logic. President Trump leaned back, arms crossed. That is cute. But you know, Congresswoman, passion is not a policy. It is just theater, unless you have numbers. Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. I do have numbers. You just do not like them. President Trump smirked, opening his folder. Let us talk about the East Dallas Health Clinic again. I have the financial report. It says they had operational failures and poor patient tracking systems. If we are talking numbers, let us start there. Jasmine Crockett did not look at the paper. She did not need to. I have been to that clinic 3 times this year. I have seen grandmothers wait 5 hours to refill heart meds. I have met kids with undiagnosed asthma because their parents could not afford a checkup until school flagged it. The system might have failed on paper, but on the ground, it is the only thing they had. President Trump laughed lightly. Out. You sound like you were running a charity, not a government. Jasmine Crockett paused, then tilted her head slightly. You sound like someone who thinks empathy is weakness. Silence. That one hit harder than expected. A woman in the second row lowered her notepad. Even one of President Trump's aides, standing along the wall, looked up from his phone. The moderator cleared his throat. Let us steer the conversation back to solutions. What can realistically be done about resource inequality in rural and urban health zones? Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her hands on the table. You start by acknowledging the disparity is real. That is the part people skip. You do not fix what you refuse to admit is broken. Then you reinvest, not in theory, in action. I filed a bill last session to restore grant pathways for community health networks. No one on the other side even brought it to a vote. You want solutions? Stop pretending compassion and policy are opposites, President Trump interrupted. Bill was bloated with special interest funding. Jasmine Crockett turned to him, now fully, her eyes locked. That is not what your office said when they tried to sneak in an amendment giving tax breaks to medical device companies. He opened his mouth, then closed it. She was not bluffing, and he knew it. The room shifted again. For all his force, all his presence, President Trump was chasing now, not leading. Jasmine Crockett turned back to the moderator. I came here to talk about people. If that is inconvenient for politics, maybe politics needs to adjust.
The moderator,
Clearly caught between his time slots and the moment unfolding in front of him, leaned in. Final thoughts from both sides. 30 seconds each. President Trump went first. America needs strength, not sentiment. We move forward by focusing on performance, not personal attacks. He gestured to Jasmine Crockett as he said it, a soft jab, a way to close with control. Then it was her turn. She did not reach for notes, did not shift in her seat. Strength without conscience is just power, and power without responsibility? That is chaos. I do not care how sharp your policies look on a spreadsheet if they break the people they are supposed to serve. It was not loud. It did not have to be. The room did not clap, but it did not move either. The moderator thanked them, but no one really heard it. They were still sitting with her words. But it was not just the room that heard her. It was the whole country watching, waiting, wondering if this was more than a moment. 2 days later, Jasmine Crockett's name came up in a church, basement in Akron, in a union hall in St. Louis, in a college cafeteria in Albuquerque. Not because of a campaign ad, not because of a press release, but because people were talking about her like she was theirs. She speaks regular, one woman told her sister over breakfast in Little Rock. She does not talk like she is trying to get votes. She talks like she is trying to make sense. On social media, something unusual happened. People who normally did not agree politically were sharing her clips. Not to argue, but to listen. The rematch in Raleigh had cemented what Cleveland had introduced. This was not just a soundbite anymore. It was a pattern. And patterns make movements. Cable networks picked it up fast. Pundits started speaking in cautious tones. There is a shift, one said. We do not know where it leads, but it is clear this is resonating. In New Jersey, a high school civics teacher replaced his lesson plan with a group viewing of both debate clips. He told his students, "We are watching a real-time shift in political tone. Pay attention not just to the content, but to the how." Young voters began flooding Jasmine Crockett's district office with messages. Not just Texans, but voters from Seattle, Birmingham, Cincinnati, Topeka. Reggie Palmer, her chief of staff, walked into her office with a list one morning. "You have got emails from 12 colleges asking you to speak. And now 3 activist organizations are circulating petitions to get you on a presidential ticket in 2028. Not just talk. Real organizing." Jasmine Crockett sat back in her chair, rubbing her temples. "I just told the truth. I was not auditioning for anything." Reggie Palmer raised an eyebrow. "That is why it worked." Elsewhere, conversations got tense in unexpected places. At a donors' retreat in Palm Springs, one Republican strategist stood up and said, "If we cannot speak to people like she does, we are not just losing elections, we're losing relevance." In private, a few Democrats, ones who had previously called Jasmine Crockett too sharp, too confrontational, or too new, started quietly rethinking their language. The establishment had taken notice. But it was not just political, it was personal. One night, Jasmine Crockett received a letter from a woman in Kansas. It was handwritten, no return address. The note read, "I am white. I am 67. I voted for Trump twice. I do not agree with everything you said, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was speaking to me without pretending. You did not make me feel stupid. You made me feel seen. Thank you." Jasmine Crockett read it twice, then folded it up and tucked it into the back of her notebook. She said nothing, but her face shifted slightly, just enough for Reggie Palmer to notice. "Stuff like that gets you," he said. She nodded. Yeah. The headlines kept coming. A new voice in the Democratic Party. Crockett challenges traditional power structures with calm precision. Is America ready for straight talk again? But she stayed quiet, refused the magazine covers, declined the panel shows, not out of fear, but because she understood something deeper. Moments are loud, movements are quiet. They start small, in corners, in notes, in phone calls, and they grow behind the scenes. Allies started to gather. Congresswoman Tamika Rowland from Maryland reached out. So did Senator Luis Ortega from Arizona. People Jasmine Crockett respected. People who rarely said much in public but worked hard in committee rooms when no one was looking. They were not trying to build her up. They were trying to build with her. And while the country debated her future, she remained where she had always been, right in the mix, in the work, in the daily grind of policy. She gave a speech on education funding in Houston, visited a domestic violence shelter in Fort Worth, took questions at a town hall in Tyler, and stayed 2 hours after the event ended just to talk to people one-on-one. Nothing fancy, no motorcades. Just her, a staffer, and a rented SUV, and yet, the crowds kept getting bigger. The bigger picture was not just that she had taken on President Trump, it was that people could feel the difference. They were exhausted from the noise. Jasmine Crockett did not offer fireworks. She offered clarity, not hope for the sake of emotion, but direction for the sake of function. She reminded people what it looked like when public service was not about control, but accountability. But just as it seemed the momentum might settle into something lasting, a new invitation arrived, and it would force Jasmine Crockett to choose between staying in her lane or stepping into history. It came in a plain envelope, no flashy seal, no embossed lettering, just a letterhead and a signature at the bottom. The invitation was from the National Health Equity Forum, announcing their annual summit in Washington, D.C. Jasmine Crockett was not just invited to attend, she was asked to close the event. Prime speaking slot, televised, full house. The event would be held at the Walter E. Washington Convention Center. Just 10 blocks from the White House, Shayla Fraser walked into Jasmine Crockett's office waving the envelope. They want you to anchor the summit closing remarks. National coverage? You ready for that? Jasmine Crockett did not answer right away. She was reviewing legislation tied to mental health access for veterans. Her pen hovered above the page. They know what that means, right? They do, Shayla Fraser replied. That is why they want you. Jasmine Crockett nodded slowly. Then I am in. The day of the summit arrived, and the air outside buzzed, not with noise, but attention. Reporters, analysts, doctors, nonprofit leaders, and activists had filled every seat. The final panel wrapped up, and the stage lights shifted. Jasmine Crockett walked out alone. No walk-up music, no preamble, just her. She stood at the podium, water bottle untouched, notes tucked into her jacket pocket, untouched too. Then she spoke. My father was diagnosed with prostate cancer when I was 15. He had to work overtime to afford his own treatment. I remember him lying about being in pain because he did not want us to worry. A silence settled over the room. He was too proud to ask for help, too scared to take off work, too broke to see a specialist. And that is the story for millions of Americans, especially in communities that policy tends to forget. Her voice did not rise. She did not pound the podium. She did not need to. People are not struggling because they failed. They are struggling because their government forgot what its job is. You do not have to agree with me politically to know that truth. The camera zoomed in, phones went up, the room leaned forward. She continued, we have leaders who call truth divisive, who call accountability disrespect. But I did not come here to protect anyone's pride. I came here to protect people's reality. Because we cannot fix what we will not admit is broken. She paused, and then softly, I know the price of telling the truth when it is inconvenient. I have lived it. But power cannot mute the truth, not forever, not when people are finally paying attention. Applause began softly, then louder, not polite clapping, but standing applause. People rose to their feet. Some had tears in their eyes. Even those who had not planned to be moved were moved. She walked off stage the same way she came in, alone, steady, unbothered by flash. Backstage, Shayla Fraser met her with a tight hug. That was not a speech, she said. That was a turning point. Jasmine Crockett pulled away, still calm. But it was just the truth. Later that night, in a modest hotel room across the city, Jasmine Crockett watched the replay with the sound off. Her phone was still going off every 10 seconds, but she ignored it. Then came a knock on the door. Reggie Palmer stood there, holding a tablet. You need to see this. Showed her a live stream from a protest in Indianapolis. Hundreds of people, holding signs, some with her face, some with her quote. It was not coordinated, it was not political, it was personal. One woman on the live stream was yelling into a megaphone, we are not invisible, we are not irrelevant, and we will not be silent anymore. Jasmine Crockett leaned against the doorframe. Reggie Palmer smiled. Still think it was just a speech? She looked down for a moment, then up again. No, it was a mirror, and people finally saw themselves in it. In the weeks that followed, there was more noise from Washington, new talking, points, subtle jabs from lawmakers, carefully worded editorials claiming Jasmine Crockett was too emotional, too confrontational, too inexperienced. But those words did not stick, because people had seen something else. They saw a woman who did not raise her voice but raised the stakes. They saw clarity in the middle of chaos. And they remembered not the headlines, not the argument, but the truth. And in a time when too many people had been trained to stop believing in it, that was everything. If this story moved you even a little, take a second to subscribe, because voices like Jasmine Crockett's are not rare. They are just rarely. Given the mic, let us change that.